All right. Okay. Welcome to episode, I think, either 13 or 14. I'm pretty sure it's 14. And we're recording this on Memorial Day, and I'm with my friend Joe Peppers. He's a USMA grad, West Pointer, and I'm so happy to have him on. We've been talking for like the last 30 minutes almost without hitting record because we have
Yeah,
so many things in common. So this is going to be a great episode, man. Dude, thank you for being here. Do you want us just to pick off where we left off, or do you want to kind of launch into your story why you went to West Point? What
as
do you
you
feel
like,
is the best thing?
as you like.
All right, man. Yeah, let's start off at the beginning then. Like, give people some context about like you, and I know that you joined West Point before 9/11, so you're probably in like Cal
Yes.
year in 9/11, right? Yeah. Can
Senior,
you
my
can you tell
senior,
us like
yeah, yeah. So I graduated from high school in '97. Born in '79, and graduated high school in '97. And uh, honestly, I got kicked out of private school. So I was a private school kid, going to school on the other side of the railroad tracks, per se, and got kicked out of private school my junior year, February of my junior year, and ended up going to public school for my half of my junior year and all of my senior year, and then got into the prep school. Went to the prep school in '97, and then went to the academy in '98, and then graduated '02. And so my senior year at the academy, uh, uh, interestingly enough, a friend of mine died. My roommate's brother died in 9/11 in the towers. And
Mhm.
so, and he and I had roomed together since freshman, sophomore year. And so we played basketball together. So we were both very close. And so that was an incredibly tumultuous time. And typically it for the from 20 from '01 to about 2021, it really dominated most of my Memorial Days. So um, but really, what's interesting is that that really shaped the first 10 years of my professional life. Obviously, I ended up going to Iraq shortly after that, and I went to Iraq 3 times. And I did the invasion, I did the elections in 2005, and then I did the surge in '07, '08. And so, Iraq was a really, really tough time for me. The war was a tough time. I didn't even know until probably the last 3 or 4 years that I had so much hurt behind some of the things I was asked to do when I was in Iraq. And some things I've never told, I've only told a couple of people. And so, Memorial Day, my dad really wanted me to go to the military. My grandfather served in the Korean War. His brother served in World War II. My uncle died in Vietnam War. So going to Iraq for me was probably inevitable according to the universe in my bloodline,
Mhm. Same.
on both sides. But but honestly, the blessings of as I get older and I have children, and I'm rearing my children now. I have 4 children: 10, 8, 6, and 4, and 2 boys and 2 girls. Is that I've really learned how to embrace suffering, and probably more so since I've been in therapy, and embraced mental health repair than even before, because I think I was I was reared with a lot of toxic masculinity.
Mhm.
The '90s was very different than what's happened since then, right? Since '01, we've regressed socially, in terms of civility, in terms of like our understanding of one another and our willingness to get to know one another, and obviously that's induced by fear, and war and loss, and not just the loss during the war, really the suicide, and the fallout of the war since then. And so it's been a really interesting journey for me to get to this place. And I think it all started with the academy, and I think it all started with me learning about war, and really learning about war
Mhm.
from what I would consider as a colonialist point of view. It's not really.
Agreed.
I don't think that I learned about war from a neutral point of view. I think I learned about it in a much more romantic way. And so I think it's required me to be curious, not just about my own mental health, but also about my spirituality, And then my mental emotional health, but also like even my physical health, my professional health. Like what do I want in life? You know, these are things that I probably didn't question when you come out of the uniform factory. You know what I'm saying? So it's been a journey. It's been a journey.
Although I'm sure you did, man. I had the same thing. Like I took the philosophy classes. You were like a literature guy, right? So I remember reading like Lieutenant Colonel Grossman's On Combat that really goes into how the Army started psychologically conditioning soldiers to kill. I remember like realizing real time, like we were being brainwashed. Like, oh, you're America's best and brightest and rah rah and all this stuff. And I was still like, still fired up, but I remember having serious doubts about what we were doing and why we were doing it. But I was in it, but I had doubts. Did you have doubts like coming out of West Point?
Oh yeah, particularly on November 8th, 2016, right? So, but like if you think about what, so just like a government that is now well established, 200 years in, and is still running academies and military academies and these things, that they're operating in their own self-interest, which is not uncommon, right? I mean, every country is doing that. But we're really not typically, we have not evolved as a species to operate in a collective self-interest of humanity. And so, yeah, of course, we were learning and we were romanticizing war, and really, like the Greco-Roman era has informed all of our ideals about war in the last 2,000 years. And so, there's no way that you could be a curious person and not have those doubts, because the first time you see a dead body or the first time you get shot at, all of that stuff is out the window around, who's right and who's wrong. It's just, can I get home? Can I get people that are next to me home? And there's this, it fell flat. Netflix came out with this thing with Rebel Moon, which was made by Zack Snyder.
I was kind of disappointed by those movies. It was kind of like
yeah, exactly. But there's a line in the movie where this young lady is saying that they trained me to fall in love while I was in the academy, and they knew that if I fell in love, that when I went to war, I would fight for this person, and heaven forbid this person dies or gets injured, then my fury is unleashed, right? And so we are always, as humans, fighting for the guy and the girl next to us. I mean, this is the nature of warfare, right? It's to protect. The problem is that I don't know that we've really sort of come to grips with what we're protecting. And are we protecting the future of our species? Are we protecting the oligarchs? Are we protecting these large institutions and these large countries that are really are we trying to further the best interest of time?
Or as another famous West Point grad, Eisenhower, said, the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, I mean, are we? It seems to be. I mean, like, what is the benefit of war anymore, right? What is the benefit of Russia and Ukraine fighting one another? What is the benefit of these wars in the Middle East?
Or the benefit of us poking the bear by trying to get Ukraine into NATO, that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, like, why are we so invested in things that aren't here? Like we struggle with being present, as our political leaders struggle with being present and being focused on our citizens and their constituents, in the best interest of those folks. And I think a lot of times we really we miss the mark in a lot of ways, because we were in love with everybody else's business. But I mean, like, hey, that's human nature.
Yeah, man, I know this will probably resonate with you. Like, most people probably don't know that I train to help ayahuasca ceremonies and other psychedelic ceremonies. I went down to the jungle to the Siona people in the border between Ecuador and Colombia, just actually a month or two ago, and went deep into what we call a chuma, which is like being drunk on the medicine. And I was taken right back to my West Point days, right back to my Army days, and I really connected with what I would consider to be the original marching orders of the United States, which is a really beautiful thing, which is the idea of, hey, like, we've got a place for everybody to come and live their life in the way that they feel is right for them without interference. Full stop. That's what it is for me.
I mean,
Like,
Statue of Liberty stuff. Statue of Liberty stuff,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
But
think
then
about
like
it, bro.
everything
Like,
else comes in. Like,
think about the nature of mankind and as we've evolved, and think about the Great Awakening and the Age of Enlightenment and the push for formal education amongst the masses and these revolutions, English Revolution, French Revolution, American Revolution. These are all about us sort of like stopping fighting. And this idea that these second sons were pushing over here and they were trying to get more land and that this would be a place, a refuge. I think that, that really resonated with the spirit of mankind as we knew it, Western civilization in the 15, 16, 1700s. I think that really resonated with and ultimately it really spurned the growth of America, through the Industrial Revolution in the 1900s.
Well, it had never been done before. And now I will disagree slightly with the whole education thing, because I don't think the education was meant to enlighten anyone. I think it was made to produce good factory workers.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I guess what I mean is that as we push, as we as a species push to learn more, and to there were scientists that were learning things. There were more and more people that were sort of getting out of the institutions and breaking free.
Gotcha.
Right. And so, I mean, even I think Oppenheimer is a really fascinating movie, but not because of the bomb, but because of this desire for knowledge and really this race of all of these huge nation states to get the power first. And it was never really about and so again, sort of like, I think that mankind's desire to seek knowledge is ultimately either what's going to save us, or if we don't reach a tipping point, I think it will really cause us a lot of harm. And I
totally agree.
And I think war is meant to preserve power and power for the few. It's not. I don't see. Rarely do we have these moments like the Civil War and World War II where we're really preserving something that's right. And I don't even think that those motivations were pure either. So I think it's a really confusing.
I also agree.
But again, like think about this conversation we're having. It's super nuanced, and it's easy. Yeah. Either if you're a CNN person or an MSNBC person or a Fox News person or a Newsmax person, it's easy to just jump on a bandwagon and just choose a side. And I think that there's only really one side, and that's really the health and welfare of the human species and the human race. And I think I pray that the one thing that will come from all of this fighting that we've experienced the last 2,000 years is that in 2,000 years, when we're in Mars or in the moon, that we look back on that time and we like, man, wow, we were really uncivilized. We really didn't get it. We really didn't understand things.
Dude, I hope so, and I also pray for that. I think it's also probably necessary to drop a note that although the creation of America as an ideal was probably the first time that ever happened in history and was a great thing, we also, in the implementation of that, did some very nasty things, like the displacement of Native Americans, like building the entire country off the back of African slaves. There were a lot of shit that went down that we can't like completely gloss over that part.
Right. And so
I kind of wanted to mention that.
And so think about it. Like what's happening in politics is we don't even like to tell the truth. We don't even like to, I don't even think that that's emotional to say that we did that. That was wrong. I mean, if you want, we, because I don't even like to say we when I think about those things. But as a country to have done those things was wrong. Just say it. It was wrong. What's the big deal? Why what's the big deal to say that you're flawed and that that the founders of this country were flawed and the people that were leading this country initially were flawed? Like we know that you can't dehumanize a whole group of people and put them on. I mean, think about like if you were looking at this from the moon and you saw a subset of people
like pushing, what the fuck are they doing down there?
Pushing people into like little reservations or like pushing like, okay, like, hey, this subset, like if we saw that in any other animal species, we would think that was bizarre behavior. We would think that was barbaric and uncivilized. So like, just say that we weren't always civilized. We weren't always smart enough to know better. And we used to crucify, humans used to crucify people and put them on trees, on wood, and keep it like, like, so yes, we used to be barbaric, and hopefully we would like to not be anymore. So like, just talk about it in a way that's informational and educational, and then say like, hey, how can we be more enlightened going forward? How can we not repeat these same mistakes?
It's this process of like, when I think of education, it's the ideal of training people how to think for themselves, or kids how to think for themselves, and have genuine discussions, like empathetically listening. And like the idea, I feel like a lot of the reason why it's so hard for people to take one side or the other, say, yeah, slavery was bad, or like, yeah, the creation of America, the way they did it was bad, is because it's sort of the way that we're sort of in extremes, kind of pointing at each other and pointing the finger. Like at the end of the day, I think most humans want other humans to live in health and happiness. And if we
Yes,
just accept if we
yes.
just accept that and try to find the common ground, as opposed to trying to find how the other people differ, I think that's going to put us a lot further down the road.
Yes, and honestly, like really where we are as a species, I do think we're at a tipping point, because you do have an incredible number of people that have been educated, and probably to a certain extent, past what the institutions really like. The institutions aren't gonna do the hard stuff, right? Like they barely want to do bridges and roads. I mean, like educating people to be entrepreneurs and do all these other, like, that stuff is really hard. And one of the things that's really fascinating about Asian cultures, and even really like South America and Africa and India, is like, because they probably have taken a slower approach to some of these things, like consumerism and other things. I actually think that they're probably going to be leaders, um, um, as we go forward in a lot of these conversations, because they aren't so obsessed with, to me, capitalism is really is really about, it's not about the tribe. Capitalism is not about the tribe. It's not about the species. It's largely about, um, Darwinism, from a perspective of like, dog eat dog, maybe even little, and it's a lack of a compassion. And so I think these cultures that are a little bit more tied to the earth, a little bit more tied to spirituality, that's not so dogmatic and draconian. I think that those are the cultures that probably are going to help us, because they're not, they see the truth and they just call it what it is. They don't. And I think, I think you're in Colombia, right? So like, there's trouble in
Yep.
Colombia. There's been wars in Colombia. There's been drug wars from Colombia. Colombia has been known to have anarchy and chaos and stuff like that. But like, what's happened? Like, I still think that there's progress being made in Colombia, and I still think that there's progress being made
100%.
in South America. I still think that there's been progress being made in Africa. And so at some point, you just can't consume. Everything can't be about consumption. It just can't be. It just can't be. Like at some point, we have to think about the future in a way that is more inclusive, in my opinion. Sorry, I'm like
Dude,
on a rant.
I totally agree, man. No, dude, that's fine. I'm in it. No, I really resonate with a lot of your viewpoints. I think what we were talking about earlier is this idea of like no extremes in anything. I want to talk about like a lot of things like masculinity and a lot
Yeah.
of other stuff that we want to get into. But first, like, are you open to share some of the things that you experienced in the army or during combat, and the effects that had on your life afterwards, and maybe why it took you so long to realize you might need therapy?
Yeah, I grew up in a very toxic masculine culture, and I grew up in the South Side of Chicago. We used we call people, the colloquialisms and the pejoratives around, like, being gay or faggot, like these kinds of words. When you think about how charged that word sounds, it sounds sort of gross, even for a masculine man. Like, some of these words, you realize have such negative connotations. And I grew up in that culture, the Arnold Schwarzenegger, or Sylvester Stallone, the rebel without a cause, the rugged American individualism. Like, to me, this dirty, hairy concepts, these things weren't necessary. They might have pushed forward strength, but I don't know that they always push forward compassion. And you can't really build a tribe without both. And so I remember going to my
Well, it's like the balance, the masculine feminine dynamic.
right. And so and to marginalize, right? Like, I mean, if you look at like what happens with like feminism, like the oppression of women or the oppression of like half of our species is sort of stupid. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you really think about it. And so like these are the things that were really informed my my youth, and then obviously going to an academy where it was quite honestly, porn was very prevalent early in the academy days when we got the intranet. And so that wasn't helpful to objectifying women and stuff like that. And so then you go into Iraq, and being a caveman and being barbaric was part of the deal, right? And so because and then 9/11 made everything okay. It made all of that stuff make sense, right? And so for me, you go on this journey, and then it was intimate for me, right? Because I had someone who passed away that I knew, that I had just spent time with a week prior to them dying, right? And so so these things were driving my psychology, and then I had the conflicts of being an African American male and the whitewashing and all these things. And so by the time I get done with my third deployment, I'm like, well, wow, like, okay, so like Obama's coming to presidency, and I'm starting to see. It was the first time where I'm starting to see, well, like, why are people like Obama's educated? Why are there people calling him names? And why are people making fun of him? And why are people treating him poorly? Why are people separate? The Tea Party was coming. So why are people separating along race? And then Obama got elected, and I was happy that Obama got elected as a black male from South Side Chicago. And not all my white friends were, particularly my white friends' parents, right? And so, and then there was that part. And so with all of that came a ton of intellectual, emotional, mental repression of my own feelings, my own journey to finding myself. And ultimately, that led to a lot of toxic behaviors. And so, particularly around objectifying women and philandering, and really for me, I got lost. I grew up in the church, and so I got lost in all of this sort of like chaos that we've experienced since 2001. And it was really hard for me to come out of that spiral, and I didn't. And then I took the first job for somebody who liked me, right? I wanted to get out of the army, and I took a job at Amazon. And so I took a job at Amazon in Kentucky. And so I'm an educated black male in a white warehouse in Kentucky.
No.
And the rise of the Tea Party and all of these things, right? So all of these things are happening, and I'm lost, and I don't know how to articulate what's happening to me. I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know what side I'm on. And so ultimately, I remember at some point I decided to just be two different people. And I remember saying I was going to be the person that people knew at work and the person that I was at home. And I think ultimately that led to a lot of chaos and dysfunction, multiple marriages. I got married really quickly, and my ex-wife got pregnant really quickly. And then we had 4 children really quickly. In a 5.5 year span, in a 6 year span, we had 4 children. And she was younger than me, and she was dealing with her own stuff. And so like by the time that I really that stuff started to come to head, I had taken a job, and here I am, like a liberal black male who's a West Pointer, all-American kid working in a very conservative city in a conservative state. And I just had a break. I just had a psychotic break, and ended up attempting suicide in 2019 twice, and went to rehab. And then ultimately, that was what really started me on the journey of healing. But it takes 4 or 5 years, it takes 4 or 5 years to change from that point. And then it's a lifetime journey. And you have to deal with the fallout, And so the fallout is four children that are now growing up in a split home, and in these other things. But I like to think that what the blessing of all of that is that I found hope. For survivor's remorse is a hope killer. Shame is a hope killer.
Yeah.
They do, and hope is really necessary. Hope in humanity, and hope in the future, hope in your children, having children, and hope in them. Having faith in their goodness and the divinity that's inside them. Those things are really important to furthering our species. And so for me, I really had to have a reckoning with my limitations, and or I was just going to allow my limitations to destroy me, And so I tried.
This is gold, dude.
I tried to choose the latter. I tried to choose the former, right? I tried to come to and reconcile with my limitations, and hopefully, and I think what happens too. And you tell me if I'm wrong. You go to West Point, you're an exceptional American. Like you can do 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups and run a 12-minute 2-mile. And the grandiosity and the entitlement is just oozing out of your veins, right? Like that's what they want. But that level of grandiosity and entitlement comes with a certain level of confidence, and you need that to lead troops in the combat, right? And so I think that I really hoped that I was going to be like the president. My dream was to be the mayor of Chicago and maybe the governor of Illinois, because I was from Chicago. I'm from Illinois. And I think, now it's one of the things that cracks me up. I see on Instagram all the time, these guys are like, oh, this guy's, he doesn't have to do his laundry. And Jeff Bezos and they're so rich and wealthy. And sometimes I just wonder, well, like, are they a good husband? Are they a good dad?
Yeah.
Like, are they good to their children? Do they have a good relationship with their children? Are they good siblings? Are they good citizens in the sense that they're good friends? Because those are the things that are really valuable. And if we were to be grandiose about being excellent parents and excellent citizens, and not just from a monetary perspective or a power and influence perspective, how much better would we be? So that to me, I'm trying to rest in that idea that I want to be a great parent, and if I can be a great parent, then I can be a superhero, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that's an incredible change of priorities. You mentioned survivor's guilt. I think this is something that a lot of people are going to resonate with. Can you talk a little bit about that, maybe how that affected you, and what the definition of it is? Because it's called by a couple different names.
So survivor's guilt or survivor's remorse is really the notion that where you're going, the people in your tribe aren't going to go with you. And in some ways, the if you were to survive hardship, right, these people that you love and care about might not. And I mean, when you think about that in your spirit, that doesn't feel great. Like, it doesn't feel good, the idea that I might be going somewhere that my twin sibling or my cousins can't go, or won't go. And to survive a war physically, or to survive poverty, or survive working class, and then to not, and to have people that you love not be able to come with you on that journey, is really perplexing. And I think it's very perplexing particularly for the existential, right? The people that index towards social emotional and super compassionate, empathetic people, those people that empaths, like hardcore empaths, like those people feel that in their body, and they feel it a lot differently than an engineer or someone who's a lot more stoic would feel it. And so for me,
I almost feel like in the military we develop that, right? Because like you mentioned, we don't go to war for the idea of it. We go to war for the person to our right and left. And actually the military does a really good job of making that happen. So we're forming these bonds, and then one of those bonds dies. And I sort of feel like a lot of the conversations that I have is like, we hold ourselves back from healing because we either don't think we deserve it, because we think we should have been in their place, or because holding on to that pain can be a link to that fallen member.
Yeah, I mean, like, so my 6-year-old son who was 3 when we got divorced, had these whoopies. And he was sucking thumb at night, and he had these whoopies, and the blankets were very and a lot of his development was happening when I was going through my suicidal phases, right? So he just graduated kindergarten, and I said, "Hey, man, when I came home from Iraq, I bought these 2 dogs. I got these 2 dogs, Gatsby and Achilles. And Gatsby and Achilles were with me everywhere. And in 2016, when your sister was just born, Achilles died of a heat stroke. And so we had Achilles cremated, and I kept the ashes, Scott. I kept the ashes until a couple days ago. All right. And so I said, hey, man, and this was super emotional for me and my 4 kids that are all 10 and younger who have dealt with divorce and loss and all these things. So I'm like, hey, we're going to say goodbye to Achilles. And what we're going to use to keep Achilles comforted is your whoopies. We're going to, and then we're going to have a burning ceremony for some of the whoopies. And then we're going to take one of the whoopies and we're going to wrap it around. We're going to go get a tree, a hibiscus tree, a plant, and we're going to wrap it around it and we're going to bury it. And so we buried it with the ashes, and we had a whole ceremony. We had everybody write something, and then we put what everybody wrote into the fire, and we said goodbye. And so survivor's remorse, in a lot of ways, sometimes is you don't get a chance to say goodbye. Right? I don't get the chance to say I don't get the chance to advocate for you. I don't get a chance to do anything. It's just you're just gone, and the connection is severed. And so the only thing that I have, to your point, is this emotional connection. And just like trees, we are changing with the seasons, right? We're growing leaves, and so we always are needing to say goodbye to certain seasons in our lives. We're always needing to transition in and out of like certain periods of our lives. And so survivor's remorse is one of these things that really, I remember when I went to the 20th anniversary for 9/11, and it was at Yankee Stadium. We went to Yankee Stadium. It was a Yankees-Mets game. And I remember crying most of the ceremony. And I remember thinking, like, man, I've been stuck in that day for 20 years. Hearing my roommate cry for 20 years, hearing him cry out for his brother. And how do you, what do you do with that? Am I supposed to just like go back to normal? And so, and I remember thinking, man, I wish that there was something I could do, and being overly empathetic, maybe having a little dysfunction in my history. Like maybe I was like, man, I wish I could, if I could take away his pain, if I could take his brother's place, right? Like these things, like, why did I have to come home and Mike Moody didn't come home and Noah Harris didn't come home and Joe Imai didn't come home? Why did I have to come home? Why did I get to come home? And so, but one of the things is the beauty of being a father, bro, is I'm starting to realize like this is always happening. Gravity is happening, time is happening, space is happening. It's always painful, right? I mean, a leaf is alive until it's not on the tree. I mean, it's always happening. And so it is important for me to say goodbye. That hurts. That hurts. It hurts a lot because, well, what if I forget them? Or what if, you're never forgetting them. We're all just a bacteria on a rock floating in the middle of nowhere. You know what I'm saying? Like that's all we are. We're just floating on a rock in the middle of nowhere, right? Like it just happens to be spherical and all these other things, but we're never disconnected from them. If you believe in the first law of thermodynamics, nothing ever goes away. We're always, things are always, and so I love this analogy of this plant because it means that he was going to live on, whether it's in the air and the rocks or the grass or whatever anyway. But in this way, I believe that it gave me an opportunity to say goodbye. And I think for survivor's remorse, it's really important for the veteran to learn how to say goodbye. Maybe it's journaling, maybe it's writing, maybe it's music, maybe it's poetry, maybe it's a retreat, maybe it's a veteran's call every Veterans Day and Memorial Day with your classmates. One of the things I told my classmates today on our Facebook page was that the loss was worth it because I get to be in love with you all forever. And we're not just comrades in arms, we're comrades for life. And there's beauty in that. And so, you know, life is painful and it all is also beautiful. And I think that, you know, as we discover these things as veterans, you know, and particularly as we, you know, we talk about masculinity, if you want to get into that, I think that that is really where you start to become more powerful as a man.
Yes. It's this like, oh man, just such a powerful share, dude. Thank you for expressing that, because this is exactly what we need. This is leadership. What you're doing right now is real leadership, and showing what it's like to be a powerful man and a father and a protector of a home, and someone that can also show his emotions and talk about things that really matter. And this is what I wanted to do with this podcast, because we need examples of this. Sometimes people need leaders to follow. And thank you for being one of those leaders. Like this idea of masculinity, and I think you'll probably talk a little bit about this. We're just caught in this idea of an extreme, you know, toxic masculinity on one hand, you know, this strong, brittle, like iron person that doesn't bend, he breaks, you know. And if you like, I think of masculinity more like bamboo, like really deep roots,
Yeah,
and then like very flexible,
yeah.
You know. And it's this
have you heard
idea
of the
like
Chinese
you talk
bamboo?
about Brene Brown.
Yeah, have you heard of the
No, I
Chinese
haven't.
bamboo tree?
About how it like it stays underground for many years, extending the root network, and then shoots up really quickly.
Yes. Yeah. Trees share sunlight. They share photosynthesis, right? So like trees in a forest, they share nutrients. If one tree is infected, you can look this up, you can Google it, you could do ChatGPT, whatever you want to fact check me. If one tree it comes in contact with a fungus, it actually generates the nutrients that it will now share with the other tree root network for it to heal. And
through the mycelium network, typically, right? It's through the fungus mycelium network.
We're all connected this way. And I think what's interesting about masculinity, and there is a difference between masculinity and femininity, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like saying that there's no difference between the seed and the ground or the soil. I mean, like there's clearly a difference, right? So like, and it's okay for there to be a difference, but really what we need to continue to come to the grips with as men is that God has given us more strength. He's given us power. The universe has blessed us with all of these gifts, just like he's blessed women. And but it's not to tear down. The same strength that I can use to tear down is the strength that I can use to build. Right, the same strength that I could use to build the walls, the same strength that I could use to build a bridge. And so the ingenuity is the same, right? So this notion that that strength is binary and that it's just like zeros and one is really reductive. One is really ignorant, and it's erroneous. It's an erroneous idea. It's an erroneous concept to think that masculinity is rigid and firm and nothing else. Because I can't raise a strong father if all I am is hard on him. Can't do it.
Yeah.
My son will.
It's also this idea of like polarity.
Go ahead about the polarity.
Like, well, it's also this idea of like polarity, like where there's masculine and feminine in everyone. You know, like we all have masculine and feminine. It's not just like a man versus woman thing, which I think people often like reduce to the point of absurdity.
Yeah, I mean, most anthropologists and scientists, you know, sociologists, like really for us, I mean, like this, the results are in, we're not that different as you know what I'm saying. Like men and women aren't that different, but we are different, and both of those things are complex ideas that require a certain level of depth to accept, right? And we and regardless of where you stand on a lot of these different ideas, I think that what happens is this notion, this red pill stuff is just as emotional as sort of like abandoning all masculinity.
You want to hear my thoughts on this? Because there's a connection. I think red pill is to masculinity what second wave feminism is to femininity. So it's this idea of
I love
like
that.
the
And I agree.
original feminist approach was, hey, we should have the same rights as you. Fucking duh. But then it sort of toxified, I feel, into sort of hatred of men because it was men that imposed the patriarchy and the fact that men
And
might have
oppressed.
benefited from
Men
it. In the
oppressed.
same way, yeah. And in the same way, this red pill nonsense is the idea that, okay, like at the root of it, it's the lack of acceptance of your own life. And it's easy to
Ooh,
blame
ooh.
somebody, blame women,
It's
blame
externalizing.
men,
Ooh,
blame
ooh.
somebody else. That's it. Like that's kind of my theory. I think that like just like second wave feminism, this is the same as red pill, essentially.
Yeah. And so will we be adversaries forever? Will we be divisive forever? Or will we find, this is why I think spirituality is so important, because when you realize that we are everything to each other and nothing to the other, the history of the universe can't be written without you, and you are but mist. You are nothing. You're nothing.
Yeah.
Like they don't even know who you are in Mars. You're nothing. You might as well be Earth. Like we don't exist. Thousands of millions of miles away. So like this idea that we are adversaries is damaging our ability to continue to grow. And so at some point, my prayer is that enough people will come to the idea that like, hey, we cannot be adversaries forever. We cannot be divisive forever. And that, hey, my role and the choice of my role is important, just like yours is. And and I think if we could get to a place where we start to embrace and love ourselves and stop externalizing some of our insecurities.
Yeah.
I mean, we really love to externalize insecurities.
Dude, that's it. It's insecurity at the root. Like these are such detailed, nuanced, difficult conversations to have. It requires a different level of consciousness for us to be in that most people are not because they're too busy slamming Snickers bars and loading themselves up on TV. It's like, okay, yes, all people should be equal. And I don't know how to wrestle with the fact that I have a white skin color and I didn't do anything to you and you didn't do anything to me, but for some reason my ancestors enslaved yours. I don't know how to deal with that. But I do know that we need to sit down and talk about it. And that me saying what my ancestors did was wrong doesn't necessarily mean anything. It requires a conversation the same way that, yeah, the patriarchy exists. And I don't know what to do with the fact that women have been literally put upon and some horrible things have been done for a lot of history by men. And I happen to be a man, but I haven't done anything. So like, that doesn't mean anything. It just means we have to have a conversation and be conscious about it and not blame. But the tendency is just so quick to blame because, oh no, I don't even want to have that. I don't even want to talk about it. That's going to open things up in me that I'm going to be uncomfortable with and insecure about.
Yeah, and so right, the four horsemen of a relationship: stonewalling, contempt, defensiveness, and I forgot the other one. The Gottmans came up with. You can't stonewall yourself out of these relationships.
Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling.
Like you like a relationship expert is better at helping us repair some of these issues socially than a business expert. You know why? Because like if you're in a relationship, you're like, oh, what are our priorities or what's our focus? Let's make the main thing the main thing. Like, no, it's like my feelings are hurt. I'm hurt.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with pain. I remember I told my friend, I sent him a quote from Pablo Picasso, and it was like the meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give that gift away. And I told my friend, I said, your role, because he was having problems with his wife, and I said, hey man, don't underestimate. And he's very conscious, very, it's a lot of similar conversations like and I said, don't underestimate the power of your role to repair. Just because, I know you want to call your wife a muggle and she's getting a lot of social media junk food and this, that, and the other, but like, don't underestimate the power of the power of your experience. You've lost siblings, you've lost your father, you're well-read, your wife hasn't maybe gone through those things. And so what's important is for you to take those gifts and give them away slowly and with grace. And we want
to focus from the individual back to the tribe, back to the community.
Right. And so if we were to start with, my feelings are hurt, right? Like we like, you know, America externalizes its insecurities and projects fear. And then that's how we created the military industrial complex. And that's why we're doing all this stuff, all these other places. If we've just like 100%, and I hate to say like America first or anything like that, but I'm just saying, like, if we just said like, hey, we really want to work on poverty, or we really want to work on reintegrating Native Americans back into the greater American society. We really want to work on equal opportunities, not equal outcomes, equal opportunities. We really want to work on bridging these divides that were started through pain and oppression and hate and evil. And we want to live in the present, right? Like we want to live right now in 2024. We don't want to live in the 1800s and the 1700s, and we want to live right now. Then we have a conversation.
Go back to a very controversial figure, Jordan Peterson, which you might have listened to. He's big on the opportunity, non outcome. And one of the things he says in his book is like, clean your own room before you try to organize someone else's house. And I think it's this concept of like, we need to clean our own room. We need to address the issues that are going on in America and our people before we start to try to change the lives of others that may or may not want it. You know,
and like, it's sort of nuts. It's psychotic, almost. It's this obsession with codependent. It's almost like it's like if America went to CODA or like 12-step, it'd be like, hey, the first step is like denial, like, you know, like we're in denial, right? Like we accept that we are hopeless against this addiction to want to control. We want to control everything, and you are not in control. We are not in control. But if we were to say we are not in control, but we can control and repair. There's a really I forgot her name. Gosh, I'll send it to you later. She does a really great TED Talk on parenting, and one of the things she talks about is like, hey, one of the things that's really prevalent nowadays, if you're really reading a lot of the modern stuff on parenting, is that everybody has trauma, toxic stress. All of us have trauma, and in fact, we all have dysfunction. What really matters, you can understand that in the past path to healing. And Jordan, I actually think Jordan is on to something. I think it's tough because some people want to put him in a bubble and push him to the far right. I actually don't think that he wants to be in a bubble. And
I don't think so either. I think he's actually quite liberal, as a matter of fact. I think he's addressing a real need. I don't agree with his solution, right? Because his solution is sort of like, drop back into the masculinity patterns of the past and more of that rigidity and that strength. But he's a bit of a contradiction because he openly shows his emotions.
He does.
I really love him. I don't agree with everything he says, but he's definitely helped me a lot. I was actually suicidal for a while myself, like deep depression, man.
Thank you for sharing.
I was down to the point where I was like, I did a lot of self-help, you know, and so I had one of the things he said was break your day down into smaller increments if you can't handle it. So I was down to 15-minute increments in the hour, 15 minutes, like doing jumping jacks with a pencil held between my teeth to force myself to smile, you know, 15 minutes of meditation. It was a rough road, man. I was deeply alone, and he really helped me through that. And that led to actually, like, you know, 10, 15 years later now, the creation of what I'm working on now. Because one of the things he said to me, I was listening to his old podcast, and he was like, hey, you know, I'm a clinical psychologist, and when someone comes in, they're very depressed, I asked them when they woke up in the morning, because your circadian rhythm has a big impact on how you feel. And then I asked them what they ate for breakfast, because what you eat, it really changes your brain chemistry. I was like, holy shit, there's a list of things that I can do to not be depressed anymore. And so I made a pact with myself. I said, I'll write down a list, I'll do those things for a month, and if I am still depressed and still suicidal, I'll go to the doctor and ask for some pills, because it's a brain chemistry thing. And that's how I got myself out of it. But dude, you're so on point, man. You're so on point.
Yeah, and I think what and this is really where I think masculinity is actually important in our society and in our social constructs as humans. I as fathers, man, like one of the things I found in rehab, bro, this blew me away. I would write down everybody's name that I met. And I would just write down like little things that I learned about them. And one of the things I found was that everybody had daddy issues. They had a father wound. And so being a father and masculinity, like one of the things my son loves anime. So we were watching Tekken. We were watching the six episode track on Tekken on Netflix. And my son is very sensitive, but he indexes towards the physical. He doesn't like to feel his emotions. Okay. And he rages when he has to feel his emotions. He's 10. And so we watched these episodes, and the story is about this mother who saves the son from the evil father and grandfather. And at the end, he realizes that the mother was, through passivity, through self-defense in martial arts, she was trying to teach her son how to control and regulate, have healthy emotional regulation. Oh, and at the beginning of the first episode, the son is like, he's in fights, he's a bully, he's always getting into it. And what he learned was, and he and I were having these conversations about masculinity. And I said, what was his father and his grandfather trying to teach him? They were trying to teach him to use what? Use his anger for what? For bad, right? And then I said, well, what was his mother trying to teach him? And what am I trying to teach you? And he said, you were trying to teach me to control my anger. And I think one of the things that's really fascinating, and Jordan has talked about this a lot, and I like this idea, is that masculinity is really about controlling your strength. Because it's something for me to choose compassion and empathy. That choice is important, right? And I have to choose it, right? Like, you know, like we just think like tribal, right? Like 4,000 years ago, I'm like out off the tribe, and then I'm coming back in and I'm playing with my kids. That you know, that level of nurturing, I have to choose that, right? And I can't treat them the way I would treat somebody outside of my tribe, right? Because that would damage them. And so this notion that I could teach my son to love and like, for instance, not to play a sport with anger, not to play a sport out of fear of failure, but to play with joy and to play with love, not to live with love, to live with joy, right? I mean, these are so these kinds of concepts are choices. Now, does it make me less powerful to play with joy and love than it does to play with fear and anger? No, I don't think so. I think it makes me more controlled, right?
I agree. Or harnessed, maybe, because I think a lot of what we do in sort of old school masculinity is control our emotions in the sense of compartmentalizing them and not showing them. Like I think my version of masculinity is about acceptance and understanding of whatever emotions I'm feeling, and then using them in a productive way. Like you talk about strength, you know, strength and masculinity. You can use strength to kill and harm, or you can use strength to protect and support. And I think that we're being called, men and everybody, but I speak to men because this is the work that I do in the container I've chosen to put myself in. We're being called to masculine leadership again, to redefine what masculinity means for us,
firmly,
to exhibit that into our homes, and to lead by leading ourselves first and healing ourselves and then healing our communities. And I think what you and I have done is gone on a very long healing path that obviously is going to continue until we die. I'm still working on myself. But there comes a point, I've seen this in a lot of ceremonies and a lot of personal work and a lot of men's circles, etc. And there comes a point where you work so much on yourself that it flips and you have to start serving others, or you're kind of an asshole.
Right. Right. Because I mean, like what good, I mean, like the Bible says, you know, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his life, or something like that? I forgot the quote, but like, right. Yeah. Like this or the golden rule, like this notion of connection is everything. And honestly, if we look at the data, and Brene Brown does a great job of this, and some other people, the data supports connection. Talk about the trees, talk about other mammal groups. All of that supports connection. You're better in a group. Yeah. Like the Bible says, it's not, you know, one of the things I find interesting, the Bible says it's not good for man to be alone. But I don't think it was just about having a significant other. I actually think it was about
community,
brotherhood.
Yeah,
and
dude, that's what we've lost, man. We lose that when we get out of the military. When you were saying that, I had this vision of a veteran like walking barefoot and just touching a tree, like in silence, you know, connecting with nature. And I feel like deeply the reason why they resist that and push it away as too feminine or too weak is because there's an instinctive knowledge in the ego that knows if you allow yourself that space and allow yourself that connection, those things that you've been compressing and compartmentalizing are going to start to bubble up and you're going to have to deal with them.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, think
And
about it, bro.
this is what I'm working so hard.
Right. So think about emotional regulation of a man or a man that can't control. He's a messiah. Whether he's straight or gay, he's having too much sex. He's promiscuous, right? He's reckless. He's reckless with his money. He's reckless with a provision, right? Like, and he's hurting people. And so when you have that much power and strength, and you're going around being destructive, you really aren't adding value to the community, and you're sabotaging your connections. And honestly, one of the things I think about, and I think about the patterns of my life and the pain. My dad picked cotton, bro. My dad was born in 1944 in Memphis, Tennessee. My grandmother was born in Grenada, Mississippi. My dad picked cotton. His siblings picked cotton. My grandmother picked cotton. I mean, think about that, to go from that to having your son graduate West Point. And having a brother die when you were 23 years old in Vietnam. He was filled with anger. And that's what he gave me. That's what he gave me. Mm-hmm. Now,
at one point, can you really blame him? Like, what are the only socially acceptable outlets for men? For their anger is violence, and for their physical connection and touch is sex. That's the only socially acceptable, and has been, outlets. So of course it's going to come out that way.
And they have this group here, the Cathedral Art Project, and they do art in prison, man. And I tell you, man, this story of these kids in prison doing art, bro. I honestly think if you took every private prison and converted it into a farm and put cows and horses and dogs and sheep and chickens, and like say, hey, y'all, like, you all can live in different houses.
But certainly not cotton plants. Let's make that.
Yeah, no, but just like they had to tend the farm, and they had to plant things, and they had to take care of themselves. Like gives them to touch nature, be in nature. This is not a slaughterhouse or anything like 100%. That. This notion of like reconnecting with nature and then expressing that in a healthy way. I mean, like even the idea that like men don't, you don't see a lot of men that sing anymore, and when they do sing, it's, I just think this idea that we don't have healthy self-expression, and I think it's sabotaging us. It's killing us. It's killing us.
100%. 100. It's keeping us divided. It's keeping us angry. It's keeping us separated, and that's part of what we're trying to do. I think it's just, we can get so angry. Like you mentioned, prison. Like the whole damn system is like for profit. So like, why would you want to release people or rehabilitate them if you're making profit on every head that's in prison? So like, you can, it's so easy to blame and to say, like the VA is not giving me the help that I provided, and then throw up your hands. But it's like, at some point we've got to take accountability for our own selves and our own community, which I think the veteran community is reaching that point. It's like, look, we're not getting the help we need. Like, dude, 40 on Memorial Day, man, I'm sure there's going to be a spike in this. The VA's suicide number is listed 22, but they didn't include drug overdoses. So the actual number is more like 40. Every fucking day. Yeah, 40 men. Every day, men and
right
women,
about that.
Our brothers and sisters. Like, I'm doing my best to get the word out, because like, it's not like 40 it's an order of magnitude. It's bigger than 22, but even 22, even if it was just 22, that's still way too many, man. And like, why is that? Well, we're losing our community, we're losing our identity. That's a lot of people, man. It's a lot of damn people. And like that personally lays very heavy on my heart, which is why I've dedicated my life to solving this problem. It's just, I've reached the point where I just can't sit around and be happy and not do something about this, because this is a weight on my heart. Yeah.
Jeez, bro. I don't like that. It's interesting, man. And I do believe, and I see veterans wanting to do this. It's really uncomfortable. I posed a question to my class, and I challenge you, or you could talk to one of your other peers to do this. I posed a question to my class that said, the appointments were hard on me, and I just said, how did it impact you? And I've known these people 20 years, bro. Man, the stuff that people were writing on Facebook, man. And I was like, wow. And like, people were like, man, I was like, I woke up and I was strangling my dog. And I was like, the despair, the despair and the pain and the torture and the loneliness broke my heart, bro. It breaks my heart. And even like I'm of the opinion that the VA should just get rid of like disability and just give, if you've been to combat, you're at 100%. And the reason I believe that is because we're really not talking about a large number of people. And if you're willing to spend $1 trillion or $1 billion on a plane, you can spend whatever it costs to give 100% to all your combat vets. And like, especially if like whatever, I just firmly believe that if you get rid of the bureaucracy, and just support and stand and support, I think it actually will fundamentally shift some of the changes. I know it's expensive, but I just believe that. But I hope that the veteran community continue, because it is uncomfortable to have these conversations. Quite honestly, even my closest friends, they don't want to talk about this kind of stuff. I mean, like, they want to talk about, kids or sports or whatever. They don't want to hear that I'm depressed or that I'm anxious or that I'm struggling or I'm on my another job again because I didn't get along with the last boss or whatever, because those are the patterns that veterans go through. And so, and I remember I was talking to one of my friends, and he was saying, yeah, I took this guy out to lunch and I'm helping him, and he just started banging his head on the table. And this guy makes $500,000 a year. And I was like, what are you doing? And it's just uncomfortable, bro. It's very uncomfortable to have these conversations. But I pray, one of the things that's interesting, I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but like,
no, man. Well, I mean, this is literally your podcast, so like, go for it, man.
It would be interesting to see veteran men really lead the conversation on real masculinity. Like, I don't believe that we should be telling dudes that they should be doing ruck marches. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you know what? Get in shape. All right, okay, I'll grant you that. Get in shape. But here's what I will tell you. I'm not going to tell you about extreme ownership. I'm going to tell you about fatherhood. I'm going to tell you about being a son, being a brother to a sister who has trauma, being a better forgiving your father because he's only got 10 years left, right? I'm going to tell you about masculinity that comes from a place of like an archetype, like Joseph in the Bible, right? Like, we like to talk about David and slinging and killing Goliath and cutting his head off, but like, Joseph's story is the story about forgiveness and about grace. I mean, imagine telling men, like, be more gracious, bro. Like, can you? Like, I tell my 10-year-old son, I don't treat you like that, so you're not gonna bully my other son because I don't bully you.
Yeah, well, that's also masculinity. Boundaries.
Right?
That's the protection of the tribe. And it's this beautiful idea, dude. Like, all I'm hearing in this is the call to men, veterans, to stand up and be leaders, to heal yourselves and have those deep conversations and get yourself to the point where you can hold space for the veteran that's breaking down at the dinner table in front of you and banging his head and say, hey, man, I got you. Like, when I was in West Point, I was really suffering during a group one. I had picked an advanced group that I wasn't ready for. And the last third of the run, man, I was flagging, and my buddy Rick Miles pulled me by the shirt and literally with the force of his body kept me in the ranks until I had the strength to keep going. Why can't we do that on an emotional and spiritual perspective with our brothers? Why, when it comes to talking and holding space and listening and giving a shit, why is that suddenly not acceptable?
I want to explore this. I'm going to do some work on this, and I'll take the challenge. The thing that I keep coming up with was this article. The title of the article is like, or this idea is protection. Like in the title of it is protect my heart. Imagine a man saying, it almost makes me want to cry. Like, I want to protect my son's heart. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to protect his heart. I want to protect my brother's heart. I want to love you through this. I'm going to tell you you're an idiot if you're being an idiot. I want to tell you that I love you. And you're not alone. I might text you randomly and be like, man, hey, man, I'm thinking about you, man. You're not alone. This notion that we can't tell men. So the sheepdog, right? Grossman, the sheepdog and the sheep and the wolf. The sheepdog is a protector. And so as we move towards more and more civility, then we hope and pray. And quite honestly, this is true. We do fight less wars. We do have less mortality from war. The hope is that we can move towards protecting the mental and emotional, right? Because we're starting to figure out the physical, right? We're starting to, and we might be 100 years away from really, 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 truly figuring that out in a deep way, as mankind. But I do think that veterans protect my heart, man, and I think that there's something to the notion of being a protector that isn't about the physical, that isn't about the
very
physical.
much not. Yeah, 100%. Dude, it takes such emotional strength to not try to solve someone's problem when they're unloading their worries and fears on you, and just listen to someone when they're talking about a situation that happened in combat or maybe not in combat that triggers something in you and brings it up. Like that is strength, man. And it's not a man thing, it's not a woman thing, it's not a masculinity or femininity thing, it's just a human thing. And it's so beautiful in like this bittersweet way when you get yourself to that point and you can have those sort of conversations. And that's the thing that I think you're trying to communicate when you're talking about raising a son and raising children to be better and stronger than you, and say, look, it's okay to cry and it's okay to be vulnerable, because that's everything is okay. Like, do you, and be strong and set boundaries, but like express and don't bottle this shit up. And it's so, dude.
Well, you know, the blessing is too is, and I haven't talked a lot about it, but I have girls, man, and like, bro, like they melt me, and you know, I tell my oldest girl, I call her President Peppers. I say, you know, you could, and DJ, my oldest, and I almost think this is like this is like natural, like some kind of natural order thing. He already knows that I'm like lifting him up, that he's going to be the king one day. Charlie, I want to know, she will be someone's queen. She could be president. And this isn't about feminism. This isn't about, like, just be the best Charlie you can be. You want to be faster than all the boys? Be faster than the boys. You want to be smarter than all the boys? Be smarter than them. You can still be a woman. You can still be beautiful. You can still do all of the things that you want to do. And like, she really indexes towards beauty and, you know, all of the girly stuff and all of that. And I'll do that with her. I made the boys play Barbies. Like, let me tell you something. My boys are boys, and I made them do Barbies. I was like, all right, well, be the bad guys. Okay. And then like my daughter's like, there are no bad guys in Barbies. But what I wanted my son.
Maybe if you watch the last Barbie movie, kid was a bit of a dick.
And it's funny because like we were on our way to drop my kids off to their mother, and my daughter had put all of these like sticky rhinestones on her face, and the only thing my son could say is, "You look ugly," and I'm like, "You mean she looks exotic?" And one of the things that I, again, is like, one thing I realized too is like being strong with my oldest, my boy and my girl, is really important for my younger two kids. But telling my daughter that she could be the fastest kid in class and be girly. You know what I'm saying? She could get her hair done and wear, you know what I'm saying? She could do. And I tell her, I was like, you can be the president. President Peppers. I'm gonna call you President Peppers. And she's like, well, what do you like? And bro, she tests well. She's doing all the right things. But one thing I love is I want her to show that she can have boundaries against her older brother, because her older brother is so strong and he is so big. But I want her to be able to say, like, hey, like I can have boundaries against a masculine boy, and I can still be feminine. And I can still operate in my feminine energy and all of that, and just be yourself, you know, whatever. So it's really important. I honestly, I think fatherhood is a real blessing. Community is a real blessing, because once you start to give back to your point about being selfish, once you start to teach these lessons that you learn through therapy and these other things, these experiences you have, and you do it with grace and humility, it really, really starts to humble you, and it really helps your own journey, I think. And that's really the blessing that I've had the last 5 years. Even I broke my leg 3 months ago, and I feel like God was just trying to teach me, like, slow down, bro. And I'm like, man, I just want to be back at work. I just want to be out there. I just want to be back in the game. But one of the things that I realized is, like, man, this season I needed to have a season where I could speak to my shadow side through my son and do shadow work. Look, this is a picture I drew in therapy.
Oh, hell
my
yeah.
my shadow work and the light and we watch the Star Wars and we really talk about shadow work. And honestly, you see that in your kids, man, and you see that in teaching. And it allows you to break because once you start to do some shadow work and you really start to realize like, man, hey man, we all are like, as Christians would say, we're all sinful. You really start to see like, hey, okay, like that's inherent. That's not a now and then as I get older, I have the autonomy to choose and I have agency, right? And so and even teaching your kids around emotional regulation, like, hey, you have agency, bro. Like you have you don't you can choose peace, man. You can choose love. You don't have to choose fear as a motivator.
Yeah, for me, like shadow work is about integrating the shadow as part of us.
Yes,
Not like,
100%.
it's like allow that anger to rise and notice it. Don't be carried by it, but notice it. Notice the things that come up on that shadow. One of the things that I do, like you mentioned a little bit about, I think you were touching on, we've lost our initiation rights, like our masculinity initiation rights. The closest you could probably get to that would be the military, or West Point is a pretty big one.
The
One of
sports,
the things
right?
that I'm doing
Yeah.
right now, like I'm following a traditional healing path, working with ayahuasqueros down here in the Colombian jungle, and a lot of other medicine men and women. And I'm also following the
I
Red
love
Path, which is the Native American belief chain, particularly the Mexica tribe. So
okay.
that's like the Aztecs and Incans. We have three main ceremonies. The first is the Vision Quest, which is 4 days, 4 nights, no food, no water, alone on the side of a mountain to
No
pray
water.
and to unlock your no water. It's not easy, but it's possible.
You say it's
And
a
I
walk? It's a walk with
know,
no
yeah,
water?
some people walk. Our particular tradition is we make little bags full of tobacco, and it makes about a 2 meter diameter circle, and we stay in there for 4 days and we don't leave. So I spend a lot of my time sleeping
Wow.
and praying. So that, I mean, that's one of the tough things we do.
No
But the
no
thing that
external dopamine hits. No, no,
no
no.
external dopamine hits. It is pure grit and pure unlocking of your internal medicine. And when I mention that, because the second of our major ceremonies was traditionally a feminine ceremony. So most of the native tribes will have this. It's called the moon dance. And so that is usually no food, no water, dancing for 4 nights under the
Mm,
moon. And I work, but
wow.
my particular teacher is called Abuela Gloria, and she's a Colombian that was trained by the Machica. She's a wonderful woman. I love her very dearly. And my first moon dance, I had just come in. I had been super sick like a week before, so I was maybe at 10% energy. And I'm her fireman, her hombre de fuego. And so it's my responsibility to keep the fire lit for the temazcal and for the ceremonies. And so all the wood was wet, so I'm sitting over here like fanning for 3 hours. It was horrible. It was miserable. Got through the first night. I went to her in the morning, and I said, I quit. I can't do this. I'm out of energy. I want to come back next year. I'm sorry. I can't do it. She said, smoke a tobacco with me. So she sits me down. She lights up a tobacco. She passes it to me. She's like, smoke this quickly. So I'm smoking a tobacco cigar, and she just stays there in silence. She's a wonderful teacher. And the thoughts started bubbling up in my mind as to why I was doing this. I mentioned earlier before our call that I've been estranged from my family for 15 years, for religious grounds. And I've been praying for a family for so long. And suddenly I've got a family. I've got a tribe that's willing to go to war and like die with me. And here I am ready to desert them because I'm out of energy, and I'm ready to run away. And I start crying, and because I realize what an idiot I'm being, like what a coward, like what a weak person I'm being, this choice that I'm about to make. And she says, Scotty, I want you to know that if you want to go, no one's going to keep you here, but you need to understand that in this ceremony, you're a very important part of it. And you and your energy make up an important part of the collective energy. And it would also have a very large impact on me. So I want you to think very carefully about it. And I want to tell you the reason why we dance in the moon at night. It's to integrate our shadow and these things that are coming up in you, this scared feeling, this desire to run, that's your shadow. And you have the choice to integrate it or not. And I looked at her with tears streaming down my face, and I asked for permission, and I stayed, and I went back to fanning the fire, and I made it through. And that for me is integrating the shadow.
Yeah. And in this weird way, for men who have particularly challenges, in my opinion, with their father, there's a lot of like, I don't want to be, you spend too much of your life saying, I don't want to be like him, or I want to be just like him. And really, it's interesting. This is the thing about daughters, is daughters don't really have that they don't necessarily say, I don't want to be anything like my dad. There's a little bit more nuance in the way that they see you. And I think one of the things that I've come to, particularly as in this journey of masculinity for me, is that I was always like my father. I was and not only that, it was inevitable that I would have many of the same struggles that my father has. Now, what the universe and what God has brought me to, the answer to prayer is will I integrate the things that are like my father into my consciousness? Yes. And will I pray for them, and will I repair and do the work to heal what I can heal? Or will I treat that person like an enemy? And one of the things about enemies is when someone's your enemy, when they're your adversary, there's sort of like no right or wrong. There's nothing that you won't do to win. And that's dangerous. That's the dark side of the force, bro.
Yeah.
If there's nothing I won't do to win, then how am I any better than this adversary? And so integration to me, particularly when it comes to parenting, and particularly when it comes to relationships with fathers, and this is always going to be difficult. It's always going to be difficult for most men. It's going to be difficult for me. It's going to be difficult for you. It's going to be difficult for my sons. Is how do I find ways to accept the lessons my father has taught me, and dispose of the things and discard the things that are not useful to me. And similarly, for my mother, right? And then be my own Joe and be my own person, right? And to follow the assignment that has been given to me. And so in the history of the universe, the history of the universe can't be written without our parents, right? And so it's really a very complex. I think Americans have a very complex view of parenting that's almost puritanical, and it lacks a little bit of grace. And in some ways, it's generationally been passed. It's cultural.
Yeah,
it's
generational trauma.
Right, and it's something that's being passed down from within. And I mean, let's be real. Like for instance, for you, I don't know how long your people have been in America, but let's just say that they've been here for long enough.
4 generations.
So 80 years.
Yep.
So you weren't even here in the 1800s.
A little bit over that. I think like my great granddad graduated the Naval Academy in 1917. So maybe 100.
Like one of the first classes at the Naval Academy.
Yeah. We don't talk about him a whole lot. So the rest of the family was West Pointers.
What your father went to West Point?
Yeah, my father went to West Point. My uncle went to West Point. My granddad went to West Point. So it's in my blood as well.
Maybe this is a conversation for another day, but I actually think one of the things about masculinity in the American culture and the Western culture is the reconciling with our fathers. And I don't know what that means yet. I really wanted to write. I still do want to write a long form article about fatherhood as a Black man. And one of I shared it with one of my friends I went to high school with, who's also from Southside, but also educated. And he said, we always start with slavery. Don't start with slavery. Start with who we would have been in the 1300s in Africa, free of colonialism. And I thought that was really interesting. But his motivation for saying that was about reconciliation and repair. It wasn't about, it was like, let's not start with the trauma. Let's not use trauma as the antecedent for all of the things that we are to become. Let's use, maybe however many generations ago that was, as an antecedent for our healing. And I thought that was really fascinating. And so I do find, yeah, right. Because like your story isn't the 100 years before this. It's in millennia, right?
Yeah,
So
we definitely have to make peace with our father. It's really interesting because this is something you mentioned before we started recording, is the African spirituality and how it came over and I think you mentioned a little bit of how slavery influenced it. Interestingly enough, this is how and why I'm a hippie today and why I'm in the spiritual field. Because I got for those that don't know my story, I lost a toe and a half in Alaska while snowshoeing in the army. And so I had to learn how to walk again. And one of the ways that I learned how to walk again was I started dancing salsa. And salsa is a wonderful
love it.
mix of. I'm actually quite good, as a matter of fact. I studied and trained for like 7 years, like did competitions and the whole thing. And the interesting thing about salsa, when you get really down into it, is that a lot of the moves are very heavily influenced by African beats and African rhythms. And there are several moves where literally it's like you're dancing in chains, because the African slaves had developed this to dance and to maintain their cultural heritage and history. And there's offering, because it started to merge with the Caribbean and then their African gods and the
Sure.
Caribbean gods.
Sure.
And so you're like dancing in chains and like offering to the gods. And I got so deep into salsa that that's what I was studying and really going into. And I started having like visions of those gods. Like this is me, like, slamming back like beers, like young angry army officer. I'm like, what the fuck is happening? What is this? There's something to this. And that started opening my mind to spirituality and to a lot of other things.
Well, it's one of the things that's interesting is melanated people globally seem to dance more. You have to figure, and I would love to talk to an anthropologist about this, but like Western Europeans, it was cold a lot. And particularly, like if you were in Russia or, you were in, Scandinavia, you just keep going up. It is cold a lot. So like this idea of dancing and connecting and just a little bit more, I mean, like name a melanated ethnic group, right? And melanated people, and there's dancing in there, and that could be Asian, right? That could be Indian, African, South American, Native Americans, Native Americans to North America. And so it's just I find it interesting, because I do think that, again, this is all about tapping into healthy self-expression and connecting with a whole person, right? The whole person. And I think that ultimately, when it comes to the veteran, when it comes to survivor's remorse, when it comes to protecting our hearts, when it comes to protecting our tribes, you're gonna have to fill out a little bit more than just your muscles, right? Like just my 100%. Physical muscles, right? And that's ultimately what's gonna drive, in my opinion, the healthy person. That to me, the healthy male is gonna be a well-rounded male that really believes in healthy emotional regulation, doesn't believe in promiscuity, doesn't believe in bullying, and believes in connectedness. And ultimately, that's what I hope comes from this next generation of men that are being reared right now. It's not necessarily like this over-index into second wave feminism or red pill stuff. It's really about balance, man. Really about internal balance. And I pray that
100%.
That's
be balanced, have respect for people, do good, live your life in a great way, treat people with respect. Like, it's so basic, and with non-melanated people, in terms of the dancing thing, you just have to go a little bit farther back. Like the Druids, my people, were dancing barefoot around trees many thousands of years ago. And I think one of the funny jokes of the universe is
very religious, right? Druids, right?
Yeah, they were the word Druid means keeper of the knowledge of the trees.
Right.
They were extremely religious. Interestingly enough, they had very similar traditions to the First Nations and Native Americans, like temescals. They did sweat lodges, that whole thing. And I've actually studied their lore and am an official member of the International Druid Order.
Oh, I love that.
One of the native
I gotta get
tribes
to Colombia,
members,
man. We gotta hang out.
Yeah, dude, you gotta come down, man. We're gonna have a fun weekend. That's for damn sure. Yeah, since I'm studying the Red Path, I listen very carefully to the elders, and one of the elders said, "Hey, definitely come here and learn our traditions, learn our ways, but make peace with your own ancestors first." And so I took that as a challenge, and I started learning into my own spiritual history. like gringos, white people, we have spiritual roots as well. It just so happens that the sad thing about it is that before we started wasting away or, like destroying everyone else's religion and culture, we did it to ourselves first, you know? So it's like, we're all, at the end of the day,
Have you
we're
read
all
Guns,
hurting.
Germs, and Steel?
And no, I haven't. That's on my list.
I'm gonna send you 2 books. It might be 3, but Guns, Germs, and Steel definitely. Even if you do the audio, the one thing that's interesting about the Western Europeans is the finite resources and what costs they took to protect these resources, and the path that they took as opposed to other paths that were taken around the globe. And I think what happens is when you start to take a path of violence as a manner of self-preservation, even as it pertains to your tribe, you sear your conscience. And I think that once you're in that space, then you come up with ways to distill out the other facets of life that are important. So because like I have this thing called MERPS. It's mental, emotional, relational, professional, physical, spiritual, sexual. And however you want to look at it, like, the sort of 360 concepts, like you're not, spirituality keeps us connected, and it keeps us connected to the sovereign. And whether you believe in God or not, if you can believe in gravity, space, time, the sovereignty of those things, if you can believe in the connectedness of electrons, neutrons, and protons, the first law of thermodynamics, if you can believe in those things, then you can believe in the need for understanding that there is more than just you. And there's more than just my wife and my kids. There's more than just my tribe, and that back to the trees, like the forest being healthy is good for me as an individual tree, right? And so I think that this path that they went on to preserve themselves, I think really ultimately led to perpetuating more war. And so that's where you and I come in sort of like in this West Point journey, right? So
yeah, it's time for soldiers to stand up and provide examples of what it means to have the capacity for violence, but also the restraint. We need to be sheepdogs, and we need to create other sheepdogs, and also protect the sheepdogs that have been wounded in battle, either mentally, emotionally, or physically.
You have to think about this. When they made Terminator 1 and 2, there's all of these images of these robots that are just laying all over, and they're sort of desolate. I don't even think, bro, like if you learn enough about technology and AI, I don't even think the robots would disregard they're broken the way humans do. I mean, yeah. The most efficient thing for a robot to do would be to reuse the parts or remelt and reintegrate, right? I mean, that would be the most efficient thing to do. It wouldn't be to discard. I think that this mentality of discarding components I think that's projection. That's who we are. I mean, if you really think about, like,
even if it's not more efficient, I don't care. It's the right thing to do.
And it makes us who we are as sentient beings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I think. Like, if you read Yuval Harari, like Sapiens, this is how we started to track this is when humanity happened, when we started carrying along our wounded.
Yes, right. And I think somewhere along the way, war really became, to me, war is the devil. I think it's real evil. I think is defense necessary in war? Absolutely. I don't mean to say that, but I think that this idea of perpetual conflict and divisiveness is evil, man. It's just evil. I believe that strongly. So,
dude, I'm so in alignment, man. I got a call coming up at 6.
Yeah, man.
Dude, this has been such a great freaking podcast, man. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for the things that you shared, and I really admire your perspective. And this is the community that I want to bring. I want to bring us, more of us together to start spreading out this love and this healing and this connection in this space for our brothers and sisters. And let's focus on I'm focusing on my brothers first. And from there, we'll make the world a better place. And so your kids can grow up to be in a world that's less full of violence and less full of war and more full of people sitting down and having difficult conversations.
Yeah, man. Let's do it again, man. Let's do it again. And
oh yeah.
If you got other brothers that want to get on, and then man, I think that this is what you're doing. I just want to tell you, I've been meaning to tell you this the whole time. Is what you're doing is beautiful, man. You really need to lean into it. You need to stay strong. Stay connected. If we can become friends and I can be a blessing to you, that would be an honor. It would be an honor to be part of your journey. I think what you're doing is exactly what you like the universe is. You're answering your assignment, right? And so you really need to continue to lean into that and remember that in the lonely times, because it's inevitable, right? You're going to have moments of depression and anxiety and loneliness and maybe bitterness or feeling misunderstood or whatever. But like, please continue to do this. Continue to show up. Just show up tomorrow, man. Keep doing this, man. I love it. I love you, man. I'm super glad to have
love you too, man. Thank you.
Made this connection, and I'm hopeful for the connections that are coming.
Oof, likewise, brother. Thank you for those words. And yeah, man, it's going to be a long haul, and I'm in it to win it. This is a marathon, not a sprint, and I'm glad to have other people, other brothers like you running beside me. So thank you, man. Appreciate you a lot. And with that, we'll wrap our special Memorial Day episode, brother.
All right, man. When are you posting this?
I'll have it uploaded by tomorrow, I think, and then I can post it on the interwebs. I can also send you a copy as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think that there's some things you said I want to sparse out. And do you mind if I use some of the stuff that we talked about?
Yeah, 100%, man. I'll send you the source file. I'm going to be dribbling it on YouTube, so it won't hit the YouTube channel for a while, but I can make the Fireflies available, I can't make I can make the Fireflies available. I can upload it and also send you the source as well.
All right, man. Hey, let's talk again soon so we can plan out. I don't know if you're comfortable getting on your number stuff, but I would love to talk about Columbia and getting down there to see you, bro.
Absolutely, man. I'll shoot my details over for you. All right,
brother.
Appreciate you.
Later.
Ciao.